Hello and good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to all of you that are joining us today for our May webinar. It's really great to see so many of you on the call today. We're going to get straight into it. We've got a lot of content to share, really big interest in this agenda. So we are going to move straight into our session on why your early career strategy isn't delivering and how to fix it. So today you're going to hear a lot from me, and for those of you that I've yet to meet, my name is Laura Jane Rawlings. I'm Chief Exec here at Youth Employment UK, and I am co-hosting today with our wonderful expert, Lauren. Do you want to say hi, Lauren?
Hello, everybody. It was really difficult not to go hi, Lauren, then. I feel like that should give you a little bit of where the vibes are at today. Hello, good morning, everyone.
Excellent. So between the two of us, we are going to guide you through this webinar session. And just very briefly, for those that are joining the call that are still fairly new to Youth Employment UK, the things that you really need to know about us are that we are the national body for youth employment. We have been around as not-for-profit in the system since 2012 with a mission of really how do we focus and support our young people to be able to move into education, employment or training. So as a social enterprise, we are one of the largest organisations set out to help young people through the research that we do, our Youth Voice Census and other insights that we gather. We provide those young people with a digital careers, skills and employability service that serves over 3 million young people a year. We work with employers in the system to help them think about how they become youth friendly, how they develop their policy, their practice based on the insight that we have from our young people. We help our employers to benchmark, engage and reach young people from across all sorts of communities right across the UK for their early careers talent pipeline. And then as part of our mission in fixing youth unemployment, we are trying to influence government policy at a national and a regional level. We were co-authors of the Young Person's Guarantee, which is Labour's flagship policy right now, and are able to talk and support our members through all of the policy change that is going in and around that national and local area. So there's a lot going on in that space. We have 1 million young people who are not in education, employment or training, and it's something that we spend so much of our time doing to try and fix the systems around them. You will see as your engagement with Youth Employment UK, we run lots of webinars on our policy work. We have got a webinar coming up in the next month, really looking at the furthering of the Youth Guarantee strategy. So if the policy area of our work's of interest to you, make sure you are connected with the team so you don't miss out on those specific recordings. Webinars and activity. But this session really is about your early careers talent strategy and perhaps why you're not getting the results that you hope for as you embark on that kind of work that you do with early careers and youth employment. So we're going to get stuck into it and really talk about what we hear employers often do in the system. So employers typically join Youth Employment UK's membership because they want the advice and the expertise and the guidance. And we have a lot of conversations on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis with employers of all sorts of organisations, from construction to care to hospitality to engineering, and almost in every sector, we hear about a skills shortage and a skills mismatch from the employers that we're talking to. It is universal to every sector that there are skills gaps in the transition between education and employment. And so often the employers that we talk to who are working with us or come to work with us are doing lots of good stuff. You know, employers want to be part of a solution. They want to help. They understand that we've got a youth unemployment challenge. They understand for some young people there are multiple barriers to employment. And so they are often trying to do, with very limited teams, often with very limited resource, as much of the good early career stuff as they can. So we hear about the school talks, the annual work experience week. We hear about recruitment campaigns. We hear about kind of branding opportunities of being out and trying to be visible. And we hear about large application funnels. You know, we hear from some of our employers right now that they are, when they open up a vacancy or apprenticeship recruitment, that they're getting hundreds, if not thousands, of applications to those vacancies. So we're hearing about the large attraction funnels that they have, and it's still not working, or those things aren't giving them the results that they want. And and then conversely, and it's the great thing about Youth Employment UK, we're also hearing from just as many, if not way more, young people who are trying to navigate the system. You can't go very far without hearing from young people who are applying for 200-300 jobs. You know, those graduates are still in the system. We have high levels of youth unemployment amongst the graduate market. We have young people who are finishing education now this summer. They're sitting their exams, who are looking for their first opportunity, their apprenticeship opportunity, or an entry-level role, and they are applying in their hundreds. It was really interesting. I was on a webinar last week talking about apprenticeship policy, and before I joined the webinar, I think it was last Thursday morning, I put into the Funded Apprenticeship Service website my postcode to see how many apprenticeship vacancies there were in Corby. And last week there were 13 apprenticeship vacancies in Corby, and we think we'll have about 1,500 young people leave education this summer. So for young people, it's equally hard for them to understand and engage and find out where the opportunities are. And so, you know, they're not quite getting those experiences and that exposure that they need to kind of be able to really navigate and add that valuable application that perhaps our employers are looking for. So you can see two sides of the coin sort of misfiring around each other. And Lauren, just where we know young people are at with the Youth Voice Census, add in that further colour of kind of what they're feeling right now, as well as that point of mismatch.
Absolutely. I'll start, as I always do, to let you know the Youth Voice Census is the largest data set for young people aged 11 to 30. It captures their experiences of work, education, employment, who they are, where they live, how they travel in and around those areas, and the experiences they have whilst they are there. The Youth Voice Census is open at the moment. I will be disappointed if there are not 3 plugs to have you share the Youth Voice Census with your network before this session is over. The current data set is currently out in the field and will close on the 8th of June. So we're really excited about what this year's data set will tell us. What we know from the 9 years we have been collecting this data and information for young people is that it has always felt difficult for young people to transition. They've always felt this employer transaction and employer recruitment really difficult to navigate and understand the power dynamics, the power shifts, and how ready those young people feel in terms of employment. We have always felt that mismatch. What we have seen in particularly the last 3 years of data and 2025's data set shows is that young people's confidence in themselves, their qualifications, their abilities to be able to find work and then be successful in work continues to diminish. And it diminishes at the point that young people transition into their next steps. The closer they get to 19, which the typical age young people might be considering work, the closer they get to that moment and juncture, the more they feel unconfident in all of the journey they've previously had, whether that be the qualifications, the things they've studied, whatever their experience was within education, and this isn't a slight across education, whatever their experiences and however good they may have been, actually that moment that they have to translate that into their next steps and work, confidence continues to fall. Opportunities for young people to continue to narrow. That's work experience opportunities. It is opportunities where young people have employers in front of them, whether that be in their school, in their college, in a job centre. Also, wider opportunities continue to narrow for those groups. There's a plethora of reasons why, some down to safety, some down to access, some down to cost, some down to confidence of young people. But a lot of young people are not getting other opportunities to show and grow their skills, whether that be extracurricular, whether that be sports, arts and clubs. There are large groups of young people across the country who just don't even feel like they can access the sports and leisure opportunities within their local area, places they might get to know other groups, whether they be young people or in fact across multi-generations as well. So those places and spaces where we experience things for the first time, we have friction, we build relationships, we meet new people, are fundamental to us knowing, growing and understanding who we are and where we sit within the world and what skills we have. The more they continue to diminish, the more we continue to narrow young people's confidence, abilities, and just exposure to the wider wider world of work, which means the experience gap continues to grow. Young people, while they are in our education systems, really do feel like they are experiencing knowledge of what teamwork might be like and problem solving might be like in those places and spaces, but that translation gap, that experience gap, putting that into practice through opportunities is one of the biggest drivers in terms of young people's confidence that they'll be successful, continuing to decline.
Yeah, and it's really interesting with sensors, isn't it? Every year we're looking for kind of where the positive grass shoots are, and we do talk to young people about what it's like to be at work. So those young people who are in apprenticeships, and those young people who are in employment. Certainly we see young people in apprenticeships who are happier and more confident than those in other routes. But of course, when the vacancies are low for that transition and that pathway, it's making it really hard for our young people to kind of land softly within organisations who can support them and close those experience gaps that Lauren was just talking about. And we're talking very generally there about last year's data, but actually what we can see, and when we sort of present the census in full, which can take a full hour to get through some of the data because it's so rich, is we can carve that data up by the demographics of those young people. So the characteristics that we know disadvantage so many of them. If you are a young person from a free school meal background, if you have a special education need, a mental health challenge, if you are a care leaver, care experienced young person, if you are an ethnic minority, you will have a different set of experiences to those of your peers who might not have those protected characteristics. So we're really seeing a complex picture in the experiences of our young people, and it's where inclusion for me has got a little bit lost in the early careers world, because we know lots of employers want to build an inclusive workforce. They really pride themselves on creating inclusion, as a key fundamental driver for their organization's success. But actually, we are still seeing organizations using recruitment processes from sort of 10, 15, 20 years ago. They're still kind of using one size fits all for a cohort rather than tailoring. And when you really unearth kind of those individual experiences of our young people, particularly those from marginalized groups, and you think about the characteristics as I just have laid out, or where they live and what the barriers might be, from transport to opportunity, and those can be really substantial issues. When you think about the level of education and training, for some young people, particularly those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, lower attainment levels, pathways are just cut off for them because of the types of ways employers are engaging or recruiting in the system. And it's the same for work experience. We know from the census last year that only 26% of young people were offered work experience in their school. So if employers are using measures in the early careers process that require the skill from a work experience, we will be closing off opportunity to just over 70% of those young people without that experience. And we know, of course, the Saturday job has changed too. So there's loads of these kind of systemic issues that are really prevalent today that we're seeing kind of employers, who we talk to, not perhaps adapting for in the most agile way to really ensure that inclusion stays front and center into their recruitment process. AI might be a really good example of that as we get into kind of further conversations through this session. And we know it's not easy for employers, and that's a really important moment. We hear from these employers, about that skills gap, that we've got hard to fill roles, really struggling to kind of get the skills, the attitudes, the behaviours that they were hoping and expecting for, that high volume versus low quality of applications, which is a real cost to manage for a business. It's really expensive to triage 10,000 applications at a time when businesses are also under rising costs and business pressure themselves. We talk to some very large employers who have very small early careers teams. And so you're doing a lot of work and a lot of outreach in a very challenging and cost restrictive period. I think it's not easy to be in the early careers world right now. that AI, that changing skills needs of what you're going to want from your next recruits and the workforce that you hire. And of course, the policy change has been constant in the last 10 years, but particularly in the last 18 months, there's a real effort from government to tackle youth unemployment, lots of movement around the apprenticeship agenda, activity around those young people who are not in education, employment or training. We've seen the kind of evolution of the youth guarantee and the jobs guarantee policy. That is also really hard to navigate for a small team who are doing so much. And of course, then what they can often lead to is that fragmented early careers activity. No doubt you'll have a school calling you, a college calling you, a parent who works in your organisation trying to get something from your early careers offer, whether that's a school talk or a work experience placement. It can easily become very fragmented without a strategy and full approach to it. And some of those kind of challenges then do, I think, absolutely limit our diversity and retention results because of the environment that we're working in. And it's important to recognise that, research suggests, research from CIPD and other HR bodies, that the turnover of an employee can cost around £30,000 by the time you've gone out to invest in that early careers, or you've put in the hiring mechanisms, and then you've onboarded somebody, put in some training. It can be really significant in terms of lost productivity when that doesn't work out, and then you're back in the cycle of rehiring. So getting this wrong is really expensive for lots of different ways, whether that's because of the inclusion agenda or because of the absolute retention and financial cost that happens too. And we do recognise at the moment, the cost of hiring has got much more significantly expensive, particularly for those younger people, with the increase of the national insurance contributions and the national minimum wage. We can see here now it's never been more expensive to be an employer. So it's never been more expensive to get it wrong either, in contrast. So where we think employers are getting it wrong is by this kind of approach that is more fragmented and less strategic. And for us, and Lauren and I spent a lot of time talking about this, we're currently leading some CPD for employers in the south of London around workforce strategy and early careers and recruitment and retention. And in the conversations that we're having with those employers and in the training that we're providing, we're really able to show that actually it's the stepping back and thinking about your entire workforce need, and then thinking about how early careers is a fundamental feeder for your future talent pipelines and to close that skills gap makes the biggest amount of difference for organisations, and actually will reduce cost and improve retention when we get this right. So we're working with employers and helping them think and evaluate their future workforce needs, absolutely looking at that kind of 5-10-year strategy to help them really understand what they're going to need, where the skills gaps are going to be most prevalent. And I think this is really interesting as part of the research that we were doing, readying for this training. We kind of recognised and identified in that if you have got an ageing workforce, and let's just say that you've got some significant staff with significant skill who are in the age bracket of around about 55, what we know about youth engagement and youth participation is if you need to replace those skills of that ageing workforce before they leave your business in another 10 years' time, you will need to be talking to young people as early as the age of 13 to give them the consistent reach and exposure to the world of work, help them think about the GCSEs choices, to help them think about their post-16 choices, to help them think about their post-18 choices. If you need a certain set of skills, technical, professional skills, you are going to have to build that knowledge and that inspiration up early, so early that you'd be working with 13-year-olds in the system so that they are ready to replace your 55-year-olds. And I think that's what we're talking about when we're talking about joining your whole early careers and workforce planning systems together. Because without that insight across the piece, you're going to maybe get lucky and hire the right hires, but you are not designing a system to ensure that you get the right hires. And in a very challenging labour market, you're going to need to make sure that your business wins the talent wars that no doubt will continue to go. And Lauren, that piece around understanding where your young people are at, can you just bring in some colour to that for organisations? It's not just the school system, right? It's not just one age or stage.
No, when we're thinking about where young people are at, and it's really difficult to, in a webinar like this and for this short period of time, not to generalize, but actually we don't. The Youth Voice Census itself is over 200 pages long. We spend a lot of time digging into the data. Young people aren't one homogenous group, and 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, they don't all fit a narrative. But I will talk generally so we are able to kind of move and progress. We're thinking and kind of understanding and kind of looking at age, stage, experiences and choices of young people. It differs up and down the country. Where you live, as we were talking about earlier, really matters. That isn't just that you are born in West Yorkshire. It's the exact road, town, place that you are born into, the school you go to, how you are able to access and feel safe within that local area really makes a difference and impacts how you then experience education, employment, and moving on. So we think about where we might start as employers looking at that strategy and what we might need to consider. I'd always put a message in my inbox and have a conversation about the Youth Voice Census and what it tells us. Who are we really looking at trying to reach, encourage, and engage? Are we thinking about our workforce strategy from a diversification perspective? Are we really looking at how we might encourage more young women into our STEM or engineering subjects? What's our purpose here? What are we doing? How can we support and tackle it? All of those things really, really matter as we move over and as we move into it. There are experiences and there are real brilliant things that happen in different parts of the countries that enable then young people to look at it. But it's really important that we look at the local area, what our local talent pipelines are, how we as employers who are part and benefit from being in places and spaces across this country, what do we know and really understand about the people outside of the doors where we live? What's really happening in the secondary schools, in the colleges, and in our job centres within those areas? The charities that are stepping in and around young people and employees within your organisations of all ages and stages. What's the real experience here? Where can we help and support? So there isn't one quick answer in terms of being able to go, I'm looking for 19-year-olds at this point. Here's my magic formula. I'll pull it all together. What we really should be starting with understanding what our business really needs. How then we expect people to first hear and engage with us, and then what happens after that? How do we go about building that familiarity? How do we then ensure that our local community gain experience of our organisation as a whole, the sorts of jobs we might be doing, and then how we can support them into transition as well? So I'm happy to pick out different experiences, different choices, kind of different inclusion needs, but as employers, it's really where that's where we can dig in with you as part of the Youth Employment UK membership, as part of who we are. There isn't one quick answer, and I think that's what's so brilliant. That really is the opportunity to stand back and really be able to unpick what's going on.
And absolutely, and you know, there's some real points here that we'll just touch on really quickly. So as Lauren says, understanding your community and the young people and where they're at and who is supporting them at those moments in time. There are also some amazing partnerships that exist around communities too. Lauren's touched on some of those. We should also mention alternate provision, and it's currently the Youth Guarantee strategy from DWP has created these youth hubs, which are really amazing places and spaces for you to get involved if you've got one in your area. But there's also opportunities to consider curriculum support. You know, we hear a lot about the curriculums not preparing our young people for the world of work. And I'm a governor of a very, very large college. And we're really struggling with that as a college group because our teachers aren't work-based practitioners. They're not on the tools, or they're not in a business. They're not operating in the world in the same way. So actually they can just teach to the curriculum that has been set by the government. Whereas what we'd really love to do is have employers really partner with us through some of that curriculum to come in at certain stages and parts throughout a year to really bring to life some of the very relative moments that are linked to business and to practical application. So there's a lot of opportunity to get involved in some of those kind of education partnerships, but not just turning up and doing a careers fair, being a partner to a curriculum or to a particular school to make that consistency and to really close that skills gap. If we continue to teach children Shakespeare and Pythagoras theorem, which is the same GCSE text we all would have done 20 odd years ago, we are not going to have them kind of immediately ready for the world of AI or immediately ready for kind of the technology and the advancement or the skills that your business requires. We also should be utilising government incentives, but we did a webinar last month on not designing a strategy for government incentives, but ensuring you have a strategy that can utilise government incentives. And there's a really important distinction there. For me, it's about the tail, not wagging the dog, but the dog wagging the tail. And if that kind of government incentive support is of interest to you and how you design with incentives, the team can put the link to that webinar for you so you can go back and have a look at some of the guidance there. And also, and really importantly for us, it should be commercially viable for you to do some of this stuff, like being able to get some value from Section 106 if you're in that space, or ESG or social value procurement. This stuff should make a business case for future growth opportunities too. So it's not just about doing it because it's the right thing. It's not just about doing it because you need a workforce for the future. It should also be about making sure that your business is commercially strong for what's to come too. And it's fair and right that you do all three of those things, in my view. So that's what the opportunity is. How exciting. And how are we part of that? Well, for us, as Lauren's already talked about, we support our organisations as a membership body. We want every employer to be a member of Youth Employment UK who really wants to be a great place for young people to come, who really wants to reduce hiring costs and improve retention, who really wants to build a workforce for the future and be part of the system in tackling youth unemployment. So we are here to support our employers to bring together the youth insight that Lauren's talking about through the Youth Voice Census and our wider expertise like CPD training. We are supporting our employers with best practice and inclusion and the practical support. How do we build safeguarding? How do we as a national employer ensure that we're getting consistency in towns and regions where we have hubs and activity? That sort of content is the content we're supporting our members with, as well as helping our members do and benchmark their practice. How can we give you a real practical tool set that will tell you where you are today in your early careers, where there's still growth and opportunity, and how you can benchmark against national standards. So lots of different ways that we are helping our employers to ensure that they are those employers of choice and the quality is there to get the return on that. And in particular, our digital platform, which I touched on at the opening, that supports more than 3 million young people a year. And why that is really important comes into kind of presence here on this slide is because, we know that most employers think recruitment starts at application or just that one-touch work experience, that one-touch careers fair. But actually, young people start making decisions way earlier, to my point of working with 13-year-olds now. It goes even earlier than that, There's data that shows that by the age of 7, young people have made gender-based career choices. They have absolutely begun to stereotype who they are and what sort of careers are possible to them, based on gender, but also based on demographic, but also certainly based on, kind of their social capital and the opportunities that are afforded to them in the school, the college, the place that they might go to. So if we want to really understand how we support those young people, it is doing it earlier. Young people are making decisions so much earlier. And Lauren, research really suggests that young people need 7 times. Talk to us when you think about the census and that confidence. Why is it 7 times? Why isn't it just one and done?
Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful if you could just tell people something once and then it was all magic? We need familiarity. We need reminders. We need moments where we're hearing something and we need to allow that to kind of embed within our brain, on our neurosystems. And particularly as we grow and as we're young, we need to see that what we're seeing kind of has truth behind it, and that if we take that risk and we invest ourselves and we consider engineering or the arts or any other role, well, that it might pay off, that you might be good at it. But particularly for our young people, and as we grow, we need that sense that one, that we really know what it will be like. We really need to build and understand what that pathway will look like, what that pathway will feel like. We will have parents, teachers in and around us going, oh, you'd make a good, let's say, police officer for a moment. You'd make a good this. Actually, when we can't see it in ourselves, we don't really know. We don't really know what it's going to be like. We need those touch points, because that attraction alone isn't enough. Often because it only comes at a point of vacancy, versus as young people are growing and developing their skills. But young people need to understand the pathways. They need to understand not just you as an employer, but the different roles and opportunities and where that might lead them, what a real day is going to look like and where that's going to start. They also need to build confidence. I'm halfway through replying to one of the conversations in the chat about confidence too. Confidence is a real issue for our young people at the moment, not just in terms of being successful in the future, but actually we're seeing it in rising economic inactivity. Young people aren't confident that employers want to hire them. Young people aren't confident that they can put themselves out there. What we are seeing is more young people stepping back from the labour market because they aren't sure what's going to happen. We need to start building that trust, that familiarity. We need to have the conversations more times, and we need to start building that workplace knowledge. And not just your workplace, but what it is actually like to work. Some young people that go through your recruitment process will have two parents that work. Some young people will have never had any young people for generations ever work within their household. But also, jobs are different. Work is different than it was before. We are reliant on parents and teachers passing down adages of the workplace. And I think it's a lot of frustration for employers that young people don't really understand what it's going to be like to work. Of course they don't. If we only tell them once, they're never really going to know and understand the nuance. They won't have clearer expectations, and they won't have the opportunity to think about and build their skills over time either. If we start telling and exploring careers with a young person, whether they're 7 or 14, and we think about teamwork or problem solving, we're allowing them to build over time their examples, their experiences, to choose courses, to choose clubs that will support and develop them in those areas and moments as well. If we only tell them once, it is likely to not stick in any way, shape or form. It is our responsibility to make sure that we do that, and not to rush those 7 steps, because we are hiring right now and we need these young people in our working environments right now. We have to build that over time, and that trust, that familiarity. But also, if you are sitting there going, oh, these young people don't have the skills, if you told them at 14 what you were looking for and how they could help build it, they would come more ready and prepared.
Oh, gosh, I love that point. They absolutely would come more ready and prepared, because what young people tell us in a sense is they want to work and they want a good job. So they want to know what they can do, but they're just not hearing. It's just not clear enough to them. So I think that's just such an important point there, Lauren. Thank you. And so this is kind of what it might look like. And this is just one example of many. When we work with our employer members here at Youth Employment UK, we talk about these stages. So over to the left, we talk about the explore stage. This is the stuff that you might do with a school, with a college, to kind of build some of that knowledge, to build those relationships, to build that confidence, sort of taster sessions, activities, talks, kind of light touch work experience. It's all about here building awareness and ensuring that those young people kind of think about and see the relevance of their GCSE choices, or where they might make some flexible choices if the school might allow it, around vocational kind of opportunity as well. But if they can't see it and they don't know it, they're not going to make the choices that are going to line them up for stage 2 of this journey, which is a journey for young people. There are about 4 transition points before work. So you've got to kind of manage and support them to get through each of those where we can. We move on to experience, and there's lots of opportunity to create different types of experiences. We are, and this will sort of answer Charles's question, we are strategic partners to the Prison Enterprise Company. We, in fact, Lauren and I were with the Chief Exec and the Director for Education yesterday in London, doing some kind of planning and some sort of future strategic work that we're going to be doing together. And we really have supported the development of the EqualX model from the Careers and Enterprise Company. If that's not something that you're familiar with, it's worth having a look at. What we're not saying is that we need to give all young people 2 weeks work experience. I think if you remember back to when that was a system, 28 years ago, in my case, when it was a system, I knew within the first half an hour that the place I'd got my 2-week work experience wasn't going to be a place I'd want to work. And it would have been much more helpful to have 2 or 3 different work experience places to go to so I could test different environments. As it was then, I had to spend the next 2 weeks in a place that I knew I wasn't going to have a career in. And doing things like filing and admin and fetching tea and coffee, which wasn't really preparing my skills for work, certainly not preparing them for this job. Although I make the coffee here at Youth Employment UK, I should be very clear about that. So thinking about those experiences and how we build them in, and if we want young people, to Lauren's point, to be work ready, we have to show them work, and we have to do that as much as we can. So whether that's getting involved in the post-16 space of supporting around A-level students and ensuring that they get some real world work experiences alongside their exams. My daughter is sitting exams currently for A-level. She's had no work experience offered to her in the last 2 years, and she will be leaving education without having had that. Luckily for her, as Lauren says, she's got social capital, which means she can come and work here. Along with the other opportunities that we're able to create for other young people. But there's a point in which social capital isn't there for everybody. But there's also, of course, the T-level placements, and government this week have just announced flexibility to that, which is really good news for those of us that can't always guarantee a 45-day placement. We've got the new V-levels coming, vocational training, apprenticeships and work experience. There is lots we can do, taster days, one-off days, and mentoring in this place that really helps young people build their capability. Then we can move on to thinking about, okay, how do we help those young people land post-18 apprenticeships, foundation apprenticeships, degree apprenticeships, utilising HE courses, supporting and working through job centres to engage with those young people who are not in education, employment or training, and creating really good entry-level roles, job guarantee opportunities as they come. So that's talking about that conversion pipeline. And then, of course, the specialisation. Some of your roles you're going to need deep technical expertise for to replace people within your organisation. So how can you use things like higher level skills, the modular learning that's coming through to train and upskill young people ready to take on those specialisations in your organisations? So there's lots in this mix about how you can utilise policy, but also opportunity within the education and training system to really prepare that future workforce. And I think we've kind of really made this point that, many employers are spending heavily at the end of the cycle on trying to boost the numbers into that pipeline. But actually, I think for me, I'd be asking the question, if you could go earlier and know that you were really crafting those 7 touch points, that you were really building the skills of a young person, their training, their awareness, their understanding of you as an organisation and why they should want to work with you, would you really go and open your doors with an online generalist recruitment platform and open up for tens of thousands of applications? Or actually, is it better to do this workforce strategic planning that will allow you to have much readier, much more able, much more engaged early careers people coming into your organizations and into your roles? And I think this is where it takes a very brave organization to say, hey, we'll not open up the doors to the market, but we'll start investing in these relationships and build our pipeline intentionally. Lauren, have you got a view on kind of the bravery that it will take to do something different here?
I suppose, yeah, I do. I think I was just considering how bold I was going to be. But we were in South London last week with a group of employer partners, and we were talking and discussing how, as employers, we can often be frustrated that we're getting mass applications, straight click to apply. We continue to use systems that validate that in terms of large job boards. We make it so easy to apply to numerous roles, and then we're also sitting scratching our heads going, oh, why are young people applying to 400 roles before they find an opportunity? So I think we have become part of the problem. We are looking at that kind of message you were making earlier, some organizations are still using some really old methods, but actually now some of the newer methods, it's much more transactional, it's much more digital, it's making it much more competitive. So I'm not saying you shouldn't use job boards, but what I am saying is actually, if you use that job board using the same old methods, the same old job specs, you're going to get the same old outcomes each time. If you are going to continue to use some of that, I'd at least urge you to consider your processes afterwards and the job spec you put out there and how clear you make it. I was just thinking about Haven as an example. I was just trying to see if they were on the call. They've been really bold and brave in building up over time how they are working with their local areas and local communities. They have a specific need and niche, I suppose, in being within seaside towns, but they have been going out into their local schools and working with young people as part of work experience to create meals. They have their chef go into the schools, they create meals, they give those meals out across the local community to food hubs and charities where where the local community need feeding. Actually, that opportunity then builds into digital work experience, which yes, they have created through us, but that is not the only reason it is brilliant. But actually those young people within those classrooms get the opportunity to explore a range of roles and opportunities at Haven. If they complete that, they can then take part across different parks in, I'm going to say in-person work experience. I almost said real then. Work experience in person is what I should say. And for their kind of upcoming strategy, what they're looking at is offering apprenticeships to those who complete the in-person work experience. That's not going to solve every problem, but actually it's a really bold approach in certain areas, in certain locations where NEET rates are high, where they know that building that long-term cumulative approach to working with those groups of young people, improving skills and improving aspirations in an area and region will really work. I think if you can be that bold and brave, then you absolutely can, but it isn't about ripping up everything. It is about making small tweaks and changes to ensure that the pathway can be better.
I think that's a great point. And yes, we've done some amazing partnership work with Haven, really working through that system with them, and the payoff has been quite substantial, both young people and the line managers on site, as well as then, of course, the business as a whole. So what does good look like in practice? You know, the organisation's making the biggest progress and moving away from that transactional engagement to the things that Lauren was just talking about with the Haven, brilliant example there. So targeted relationship-led school engagement, the rethinking of that work experience, engaging the wider talent pool. Young people are not just in a school system. It's one of the things that we're really proud of with the careers website that we have here at Youth Employment UK, because there's 3 million young people. Are young people aged 11 to 30, some in education, of course, but also we've worked really hard with Careers and Enterprise Company to offer support for those young people who are homeschooled. And they, of course, as a group, a growing group, get even less access to career support and to exposures to the world of work. So young people are not always in, one useful place, because I understand it's useful when you can go do one thing to one whole group, but actually it's about thinking about the wider pipeline, those underrepresented groups. Where are our million NEET young people? Because they should be closer to work, and from an age and stage perspective, how do you work with those talent pools? Supporting young people to be ready. If we can't keep complaining that young people are not work ready, we have to do something about that. We have to start thinking about how and what is our job in preparing them. Who benefits from young people being productively ready to come into our organisations? We do, because there's less training, there's less support required if they are productively ready. So ensuring that we are part of the solution to building and closing that gap between education and employment is going to be really critical. Contributing to those curriculum models and delivery is part of all of that. And the sustained engagement, managing multiple touch points of engagement over time, as we've talked about already. This is combination, as Lauren says, you don't have to rip it all up, but adding in some of this, doing some of this thinking and building over years. Where we got to with Haven has taken 3 years. From a zero standing point, we are now 3 years down the line with a really inclusive and comprehensive end-to-end kind of early talent approach. So how do we deliver at scale, and where can we add value? I think really importantly is mapping those touch points across the journey of young people, using that insight of where they are, who they are, what experience they're having, what good looks like at those different ages and stages too. It's not as helpful talking to 13-year-olds about their CV when they're not going to quite need one for a few years' time. So ensuring that we're giving them the tools and the knowledge that they need at the right age and the right stage to be part of a journey with them. And the role of us in that can help with that insight. You're making sure that you always understand through the Youth Voice Census and our work across this landscape what is going well for young people, what they're asking for, what they're looking for, where those big gaps are for them so that we can fill and plug them in. Having that youth insight into your organisation can really save time, money, and kind of external research because we can do it for you. Helping you to prepare and be a good place for young people to land. It is not just about doing this external activity, it's also about making sure that your line managers are ready, that your processes are ready, that your systems are built, that you have got mentoring where that's going to be part of your strategy in place, that you have got the right one-to-ones, the right sort of resources to train and secure the knowledge of those young people coming into your business. You need to be a good place to land to retain those young people. We have that reach and access to young people, the digital part of your offer. And that might be that, you kind of have a partnership with some schools and colleges, but also want some of that digital resource so that you don't have to be always present, that you can supplement your in-person activity with digital wraparound activity, whether that's virtual work experience or a employer website sitting in our website, or indeed kind of showing the vacancies or being part of our newsletters to ensure that young people are constantly hearing about your brand and your business to meet those touch point moments, that consistent engagement. And also, the young people using our site, the schools, the colleges that are using our site are using some of our tools like our Young Professional, which is an employability program for young people, really based on how we can help support and prepare them into work and those journeys. And making sure then that your opportunities are on a platform like ours to complete the full circle of engagement. So having that employer-led experience plus our scaled wraparounds can be a real part of your solution. But for us, it really does start with testing, measuring, evaluating, ensuring that what you've got where you land is the right place for young people. Your teams, your systems are ready. And you can do that test and measure with the Good Youth Employment Benchmark, with the membership to the community, so that you can be building and learning alongside other peers who are on this journey too, and utilise us in more ways when it comes to kind of increasing that connected strategy. I think I've really talked a lot about the value of that membership. Lauren, is there something in here that, you think from some of the employers that we're working with where really they are getting kind of the best from us in all the ways to kind of add value?
Yeah, what brilliant question. There are so many. Of course, there are. But I think one of the really brilliant things is being able to explore within it the why. I had put in the conversation and the chat what we're working through with the employers in our membership that have completed this year's Good Youth Employment Benchmark. We are seeing that employers are doing more. They're doing more activity. They're part of Youth Employment UK. They can understand the value. They can understand the journey they're building. But actually, one of the big things we're really working on with those employers this year is how we measure it. So we'll be able to utilize the benchmark for return on investment and social value reporting, but actually looking at thinking differently about how we monitor and measure progress, not just saying, did we fill vacancies? How many people applied? Did we attract? I've put some of the conversations we need to be switching to, and we are supporting employers to have those better conversations. Are we improving confidence? Are we improving young people's experiences of finding and applying for work? Are we widening our talent pool? Are we building really strong talent pipelines? Are we building trust within the places and spaces we want to hire young people from, whether that be neat organisations Hansons or Russell Group. It doesn't matter what type of employer you are in terms of how you are looking to approach. And are we doing this the right way and the good way too? So that nuance and that depth of insight and conversation we're able to have this year, particularly with members who have completed the benchmark, is one of the biggest things I would pull out over and above. It is what brings together the insight and the intelligence, the strategy support, attracting the engagement, and all of this work into a much bigger, broader kind of action orientated space.
Amazing. I mean, I love the policy stuff, but different, right? Different. So what we've got time for, and I think we've brilliantly given you so much information and food for thought, we have now got time for questions. I'm really happy to take those specific to your organisation or wider, but this is your moment to dig into anything that Lauren and I have talked to you about today. Lauren, is there any questions that you've been answering that you think are interesting and worth pulling out into the chat? Just, I know that you've been responding live.
I'm so naughty like that. I have replied to some of the questions which I think are more specific than any others around there too. We have lots of sort of like one line questions and answers within there more than anything else.
I think I saw one about scale and could you do this at scale? And I think that's a really important question. And actually, a lot of our members are large organisations, medium to large employers. And I remember one of my first interactions with Coca-Cola, and might be a great example, Coca-Cola Euro Pacific Partners. When I first met with their early careers apprenticeship lead, Sharon Blyfield, they were absolutely, across all different sites, had all different sorts of strategies going on. Work experience was offered to site staff's children rather than having a really strategic approach to it, a fair and inclusive approach to it. There was lots of good bits and pieces happening, but they weren't able to measure or really track that from a central perspective. And they certainly weren't able to track it to see what was working for them and where their impact was, and ensure they were getting return of the investment that was being made. So one of the things that we started to do was really build a national strategy, but recognizing the regional activity was critical too. And so we supported Sharon and CCEP to design what they wanted to do from a national perspective to assure quality and consistency and inclusion. And then we set about sort of training line managers and kind of regional leads and putting in the systems for them to have some of that local nuance, but also that fed into the wider system. So absolutely, you can design a national strategy with various hubs and activity. It is harder. I talk a lot to government about how difficult it's going to be for our employers with regional sites to manage the different needs of mayors and combined authorities and the national policy. There's a lot of that, right? Particularly then if you're in the devolved nations of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, and you've got to also manage different education systems and different funding models and different pathways. It's hard, but it's absolutely possible, and we're happy to talk that through with you. We do consultancy as well, so to help take that on.
To work that through. And Jenny's got a question in the chat. I'm going to answer it because she's in Bedfordshire and all of the good people are. So we will make sure we have time to support Jenny. So Jenny's question now is, what recommendations have you got for how employers engage with offering an opportunity to someone who is NEET? How easy is it working with the Job Centre Plus?
It's an excellent question, and I am leaving this webinar to go and do a webinar with Jenny, so we should definitely answer Jenny's question. Good morning, Jenny. The Job Centre are really trying hard. I was on a call with DWP last week. They want to be the recruitment service for those unemployed young people. They want you to know, as employers, you can walk into the door and say, help me recruit an unemployed young person from this town, this region. And they're putting lots on. There's lots of work tasters. There's lots of meet and greets. You can interview on site at your job centre. You can do workshop activities with your local job centre. So there is a real building work going on with the job centres to be able to be that local employment service for young unemployed people and all age. And of course, then there's some local youth hubs. We don't have a youth hub yet in Bedford, but there is certainly one that I've been involved in Peterborough, where they are at Peterborough Football Club, inviting young unemployed people from the town to come in and meet with employers in that safer environment that feels less formal than a job centre. So certainly opportunity to engage and work with neat young people through both of those.
And it's definitely a partnership. We've had some really brilliant examples of how that works for employers, but when it doesn't work is when we go in going, the job centre are going to find me someone. This is their responsibility. This is their job. I'm just going to turn up and do it. That's when it doesn't work. When it does is when it's formed as a partnership, when you can be really clear about what you're looking for, how you can help and what support, what's really on offer. That's where the good conversation comes as to who's going to support, how this can work. Spoken to employers recently who go into the job centre. They do the interview there. The employers there a few different times across the moments they can start to build that trust and familiarity. That's when it works really well, and the job centres are really up for that, but it does take time and conversation. It doesn't take kind of a bossiness where we might approach them in a different way.
Amazing. Right, we're getting some of you jumping off because you need to go and get your sandwich before your 12 o'clock. I get that, me too. And this is your second and third reminder that the Youth Voice Census is open, and we really need more young people to take part this year, because the data, as you will have seen, allows us to inform employers to improve that practice. It also allows us to talk to government about what policy interventions we need to make a difference. We have so many resources and support for organisations to get their young people to participate. We're calling on employers and partner organisations to give an hour. So any young people in your organisation, let's get coffee and a cake, sit them down with a laptop or a phone so that they can complete this year's Youth Voice Census and take some pictures and show off that you're giving young people in your network time to have a voice on the issues that really matter to them. So please do ensure you take part in this year's Youth Voice Census. And if you think working with us got expensive, well, think again. As a not-for-profit social enterprise, this is not about taking lots and lots of money from organisations. It's about working together as a community to do the right thing for you and to do the right thing for young people. So please do look at how you might engage and work with our membership team to get their support in your early careers activity.